All right, today we're cracking open a cold case. And I mean a really cold case. We're talking tens of thousands of years old. We're on the hunt for a lost branch of humanity, a species that might have been stronger, smarter, maybe even more advanced than we can imagine. The big question is, were they a super civilization that was just erased from history? Let's get into the evidence. One expert, when they saw the evidence, said this, and it's just perfect. It's like finding a new iPhone in an Egyptian pyramid. And honestly, that's exactly what it feels like. Because at the very center of this whole mystery is an artifact, something so far beyond its time that it just shouldn't exist. This is the kind of clue that makes you stop and question everything you thought you knew about our past. Okay, so every great investigation needs a starting point, right? A piece of evidence that just doesn't fit. Well, this is our Exhibit A, and it might just be the most compelling, out-of-place artifact ever found. Seriously, this one thing completely blows up our timeline of technology.
Deep inside a cave in Siberia, the Denisova Cave, archaeologists found this. Now, this is no crude piece of Stone Age jewelry. What you're looking at is a gorgeous green bracelet made of a stone called chloritolite. I mean, it's polished to a mirror shine. And when you hold it up to the light, it's supposed to glow with this incredible deep green color. Here's the kicker. It's been dated to somewhere between 50 and 70,000 years old. But as amazing as it looks, its beauty isn't even the craziest part.
No, the real mystery is the hole. See that tiny hole for the cord? It's drilled with almost perfect precision. And scientists who've studied it are baffled. They've basically said the only way to make a hole like that is with something like a high-speed drill, a modern tool, a technology that was supposed to be, 70,000 years in the future? So yeah, how on earth did they do this?
And get this, the bracelet wasn't a one-off. It wasn't some lucky fluke. In the very same layer of the cave, they found more, like this needle. It's 50,000 years old, carved from bone, and look at that tiny eyelet for the thread. That's not for stitching crude animal hides together. That's for making tailored clothing, a massive technological leap. You add that to other finds like symbolic art etched onto stone, and suddenly you have a pattern. This is evidence of a culture that was way, way more sophisticated than anyone thought.
So the question is obvious, right? If you have these super advanced artifacts, who made them? Who were these incredible artisans? For the longest time, nobody knew. It was a total mystery. But then, the big break in the case came from the same cave, but it wasn't a tool this time. It was a tiny, tiny piece of bone.
So back in 2008, sifting through the dirt in that very same cave, they find it, a tiny piece of a child's finger bone. The first thought was, okay, must be Neanderthal. Makes sense, right? But then, in 2010, they managed to sequence its DNA. And the results, well, they sent an absolute shockwave through the entire scientific world. This bone didn't belong to a Neanderthal. It didn't belong to one of our ancestors. It belonged to no known human species at all.
I mean, this discovery just rewrote the book on human history. We always thought it was basically us, Homo sapiens, and our cousins the Neanderthals. But nope. There was a third major player on the scene, the Denisovans. We call them a ghost lineage because they were living at the same time as our ancestors, but they barely left a trace. All we have are a few tiny fragments of bone and a couple of teeth.
Okay, so now we have a suspect, the Denisovans. It's time to build a profile. What do these people look like? What could they do? The clues we can pull from their DNA and the few fossils we have, well, they paint a picture of a human with some seriously remarkable, almost superhuman traits.
Let's start with the most important part, the brain. There's a skull found in China that they call Dragon Man, and a lot of experts now think it's Denisovan. The space inside that skull for a brain, its cranial capacity, was about 20% larger than yours or mine.
And it wasn't just about size. It might have been wired completely differently. When scientists looked at their DNA, they found unique genes related to how the brain develops. Now, we can't know for sure, of course, but it opens up this wild possibility that they thought differently than us. Maybe they had superior memory, or could see patterns in ways we can't.
And their physical abilities, their genetic superpowers, were just as incredible. Their DNA had something called the EPAS1 gene. It's known as the super athlete gene, and it's what lets people in Tibet live at crazy high altitudes without getting sick. They also had genes for a shield-like immune system. And the fossils we do have show these massive jaws, twice as thick as ours, with huge teeth. All of this points to a human that was just built tough, designed to survive anything.
And here's where the case takes a really strange twist. They're not completely gone. We know this because our ancient ancestors, well, they met the Denisovans and they had children with them.
Their DNA lives on inside of us. People today in places like Tibet, Papua New Guinea, and Australia can have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. So those superpowers, like that gene for living at high altitudes, that was a gift from them to us.
So, let's recap. We have our suspect, a superhuman species with advanced tools. But here's the question. Were they just a few clever individuals hiding out in a cave, or were they part of something bigger? To figure that out, we have to widen our search. We need to look beyond the cave, at the landscape itself.
Right in the heart of what we now know was Denisovan territory, there's a place called Mount Shoria. And there, you find these things. Absolutely massive granite blocks, some weighing thousands of tons, with what looked like right-angle cuts. Now, the official geological explanation is that this is a totally natural formation, but you could see why some people look at the flat surfaces and perfect corners and start to wonder, could this be man-made? And if so, could it be Denisovan?
Look, if we just entertain this idea for a second, that the Denisovans were master engineers, you can see how some researchers start connecting dots. They see possible megalithic structures at Mount Shoria. They see ancient stone slabs in Mongolia that seem aligned to the stars, and they can't help but compare it to later civilizations, like the Egyptians or the builders of Stonehenge. It makes you ask this wild question. Were the Denisovans the original architects, the ones who figured all this out first?
And all of this leads us to the biggest, most troubling question in this whole cold case. If the Denisovans were so tough, so smart, and so far ahead of their time, where did they go? Why did they just disappear? Well, there are basically two competing theories on the table. The first one is pretty dark. It suggests a prehistoric genocide. See, around 40,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapiens, showed up in their neighborhood. We were more numerous, and let's be honest, probably more aggressive. Did we see them as competition and just wipe them out? The other theory points to a massive natural disaster. Around 12,800 years ago, something called the Younger Dryas event happened. Think sudden, extreme climate change, epic floods, maybe even impacts from space. Maybe their advanced civilization was just erased by a global catastrophe.
So the case file on the Denisovans? It's still wide open. Were they a lost super civilization, the forgotten inventors of advanced technology, or were they just another branch of the human family that couldn't survive? The fact that this entire story comes from just a tiny finger bone and a single green bracelet, it shows you how much of our history is still a complete mystery. It's a book with most of the pages ripped out. And it really makes you wonder, if an entire civilization of superhumans could be lost to time, what else have we forgotten?